After years of stability and excellence, there's quite suddenly some uncertainty when it comes to the Bruins crease heading into training camp, which begins in less than 2 weeks.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Friday, September 6th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Before we get into it, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at LockedNHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes, at Ian C. McLaren. So the informal captain's practices continued on Thursday. Jeremy Swayman remained in attendance without a new contract. And at this point, the question is whether he will be at training camp when things get underway on September 18th. A guy that we know will be there is Joonas Korpisalo, freshly acquired goaltender by way of the Ottawa Senators, who's coming off a pretty down year. That whole team kind of went under expectations last year, but they did not get any assistance from either Korpisalo or backup Anton Forsberg. Regularly giving up goals on first shots or early goals that really set the team back as a whole, and they were not able to live up to the promise of at least challenging for a playoff spot. Korpisalo's coming in looking for a fresh start as a member of the Boston Bruins. And while he admitted that the trade came by surprise, as the days went by, he became really happy and excited to come to Boston, to get to work with the team. Things happen for a reason, he said, and he's excited to be in black and gold. Of course, the trade was Linus Ullmark heading out to Ottawa in exchange for Korpisalo, who will come in with 25% of his contract retained by the Senators. So the Bruins are on the hook for $3 million per season over the next 4. The Bruins also picked up Mark Kastelic, who should slot in on the fourth line, as well as a first-round pick that they used to select Dean Letourneau. Notably, Korpisalo has already received a Jeremy Swayman hug per Christopher Hurley of Boston Hockey Now, and a cool gesture from Swayman, considering the goalie hug has been such a trademark for this team over the past few years. And those hugs, of course, came following wins. Swayman, Ullmark racked up quite a lot of those over the past few years, becoming the best goalie tandem in the NHL and also the best of friends. So it's a potentially awkward situation for Korpisalo to be entering into, but he did say that Swayman reached out to him right away. Korpisalo called Sway a great guy, and he feels like they are really going to get along well. I mean, just look at Jeremy Swayman. I don't see how you could not get along with that guy, unless you're Don Sweeney. We'll touch on that later on in the podcast. Of course, Swayman's contract remains up in the air, but having a good relationship with your secondary goalie is pretty important, as we saw over the last few years. It's not going to be a 50-50 split like we saw with Ullmark and Swayman. More of a starter backup situation where Swayman, once paid, will get the lion's share of starts. And that's if Korpisalo even begins the season in the NHL. And we'll discuss that later on today as well. Now, Korpisalo why there are some questions about his game. Well, he went 21, 26, and 4 with a 3.27 goals against average and an 890 save percentage last season for the Senators. Now, it wasn't all on him. The team did not live up to expectations. He did say everyone did their best. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. And it certainly wasn't a case where no one was trying hard enough, but that was last season. We've got a new season coming up. And Korpisalo does bring some positive marks on his resume here. He's got a 901 save percentage for his career, a number that was brought down last season. But prior to that, he had a pretty good stretch with Columbus and to the point where he was traded to the Los Angeles Kings prior to the deadline 2 seasons ago. And he played very well for them as well as they were making a playoff push. So there's a real belief here that the Bruins can get more from Korpisalo or a better performance than he chipped in last year with the Senators. And key to that is going to be goalie coach Bob Essensa. Goalie Bob has been with the team since 2003. He was a 12-year NHL veteran, manning the nets for the Penguins, among other teams. And he just looked back at the goalies that have excelled over the last 20 or so years with the Bruins. Tim Thomas, Tuukka Rask, Jeremy Swayman, Linus Ullmark, not to mention some lesser guys like Anton Khudobin, who turned his career around, Yaroslav Halak coming in kind of in the later stages of his career and putting up some amazing numbers. Korpisalo said he's yet to meet Goalie Bob, but he's really excited to see him, get to work with him, get to see what's on his mind to make his game better. They have been calling each other a lot, and they've been catching up throughout the summer, going over all kinds of stuff. Korpisalo said, we've got one job, and that's to stop the puck. It's the same with every team. And the biggest thing for a goalie to learn is how the defensemen play, especially when controlling the puck. That and the special teams. So he's going to have a lot of conversations and become aware of what the guys do. Pretty cool once you start skating with the guys so that you know what's up. He was asked about his mask as well. The cage is going to be gold, and then he's going to let the painters do their job. Some nice looks for him in the past, so I'm excited to see what his mask is going to look like. But make no mistake, Joonas Korpisalo could be a very important piece for the Boston Bruins this season. Their success, specifically last year, in that transition year, was largely dependent on the fact that they had a 1A and a 1B option in net every single night. The fact that they were able to go from Swayman to Ullmark consecutively, rotating pretty evenly, and there was no significant drop-off in the performance. That could be a lot different here, where if you have Swayman coming in, playing a couple games, then you turn to Korpisalo. If there's a big drop-off or he lets a few in and then you have to go back to Swayman, pulling Korpisalo, it's not ideal for the success of the team, for keeping Swayman fresh for the playoffs when the games matter most. You need that strong backup to be able to at least give Swayman an extra game off a week so that he's maybe playing 2/3 of the games. Give Korpisalo 1, maybe 2 starts a week if it's a 4-game week, or you have back-to-backs, and see what happens. But they need Korpisalo to be at least average in order to not experience that big drop-off in the games that Swayman does not start. Now, of course, there's some questions about whether or not Jeremy Swayman will even be at training camp to start at least. And we'll discuss the latest on his contract situation here as the podcast continues. eBay Motors has everything you need to level up your vehicle to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. They have over 122 million parts for your ride, and you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you are burning rubber and not cash. Again, with all the parts you need at the prices you want, turn your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. And the eBay Guaranteed Fit is available only to U.S. customers. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Boston Bruins part of your daily routine. For your second listen, check out Locked On NHL. Provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So what's the latest on Jeremy Swayman? Well, I was listening to the revamped 32 Thoughts podcast this morning with Elliot Freeman and now Kyle Bukauskas, and they discussed an earlier report this week from the Spit and Chicklets podcast where they suggested that Swayman was offered a 4-year deal with a $6.2 million average annual valuation. According to Freeman, nobody's disputing that, which is kind of concerning because if you look back at the reported $10 million ask, Freeman believes Swayman's ask is probably closer to what Charlie McAvoy is making at $9.5 million. There's a pretty big gap there, $3.3 million, if I'm not mistaken. Now, there's still plenty of time to get a deal done. Training camp begins in 12 days. It is worth noting, though, that Swayman's agent is Louis Gross, and he represented both Johnny and Matt Gaudreau, who passed away, of course, on August 29th in a tragic drunk driving accident, and their funerals are scheduled to take place on Monday. So I have no problems with Gross putting business of hockey on hold for a few more days as the grieving process continues and as they prepare for that service. No questions about that at all. There's still plenty of time to get a deal done. Now, as Fluto Shinzawa notes in The Athletic this morning, players who have not signed contracts before camp do not participate in on or off ice activities. So that would leave Korpisalo and Brandon Bussi. Korpisalo with that .890 save percentage last season. Bussi with 0 games of NHL experience to begin training camp. Not ideal at all. Now there is a recent history of Bruins not reporting for the start of camp because of unsigned contracts. 2017, Pastrnak missed a day before signing a 6-year, $40 million deal. In 2019, McAvoy missed 3 days before signing a 3-year, $14.7 million extension on September 15th. And Brandon Carlo was not in camp that year either. He agreed to a 2-year, $5.7 million contract a couple days after McAvoy signed his. So if Swayman's not at the beginning of training camp, it's not the end of the world. It's when you start to miss games, of course, that it's a real problem. You want Swayman to come into camp hot, ready, and to get all the necessary reps to be ready for the beginning of the regular season. But at the same time, it's not the worst thing if he's not there to begin training camp. What you don't want is all of training camp to go by without Swayman signing a contract and getting into some preseason games at the very least. Now there is a real disconnect between Boston and Swayman. Players in the past, like Pastrnak, McAvoy, have pushed the Bruins to bend perhaps further than they would have liked. McAvoy's $9.5 million deal, Pasternak's $11.25 million deal. Well within the value for each of those players. The problem here with Swayman is that while everybody believes that he can continue his elite level of play, there's questions because he has not yet been a bona fide everyday or every 2 out of every 3 game starter for the Boston Bruins. Swayman just hasn't had that role yet. So I can see both sides of the argument here. Swayman, in the games that he's played, has been excellent. And in the playoff run against Toronto and Florida, he was unbelievable. And he proved his worth in that. But it's still a relatively small sample size, all things together. The Bruins might want to, say, give him a 4-year deal at a lesser value to prove that he can indeed earn some Vezina nominations, take the Bruins deeper into the playoffs, and continue to rack up the wins without Linus Ullmark in the mix. It could be a very different situation here where he's playing 75% of the games or 66% of the games, not getting as many nights off, and without the comfort of his best friend in Linus Ullmark. It's just a different situation. By all accounts, Swayman can't wait to take on that workload. And there's every reason to believe that Swayman will indeed continue to excel in that role. But at the same time, there is a bit of hesitation on the Bruins' part because of the fact that he has not done it yet. It's kind of a chicken and egg situation. Do you pay Swayman because you believe that he can and will run with the starter's job? Or do you wait to see him assume the starter's job, excel in that role, and then pay him down the road those really big bucks? He's 24, 25. He's really entering his prime years now. I say just pay the man what he has shown that he is worth and don't risk alienating him or causing even more resentment than what came up last summer during the arbitration process. So that's the very latest. Still plenty of time to get a deal done. There does seem to be a gap. Freeman did say that there was an 8-year deal on the table at some point. It was in the 6s range. I'm sure Swayman is looking to be at least in the 8s range. Again, kind of top 5 there with Sergei Bobrovsky, Andrei Vasilevsky, Connor Hellebuck, Ilya Sorokin. Sorokin hasn't taken his team deep into the playoffs. I think he's got 1 Vezina finalist, so that's a leg up on Swayman. But Swayman does have that Jennings Trophy where he shared the best save percentage with Linus Ullmark, the best duo in the NHL. So he's proven his part. It's now up to the Bruins to pay him. The worst case scenario would be Boston coming into training camp with just Korpisalo and Bussi and starting the season with that tandem. But there's also the possibility that it could be a Swayman-Bussi tandem to begin the season. We'll touch on that here as the podcast continues. Football season started. Baseball's wrapping up. Hockey's right around the corner. If you're looking to get tickets for sports events or comedy, theater, concerts near you, Gametime is the place to be. They have a new feature called Gametime Picks, and it makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Gametime Picks, again, curates it, so it makes it easier to save on sports, comedy, concerts, and theater near you. All you have to do is download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. I love the seat views. You can get a panoramic glimpse from your seats in the app before you buy. And they also have a Gametime guarantee. Well, they'll credit you 110% of the difference if you find a ticket in the same section and row for less elsewhere. Now, terms do apply, but just create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Gametime. What time is it? Gametime. Get those tickets right now, friends. Okay, there's another added wrinkle to this goaltender situation where both Joonas Korpisalo and Brandon Bussi require waivers to be sent down to the AHL. So if Swayman doesn't start the season up with the Bruins, which would be a pretty devastating scenario considering Korpisalo's record last year, Bussi got some promise but zero experience. Those guys would be 1 and 2. If Swayman is signed, Gord willing, and is your opening night starter, then the Bruins either carry 3 goalies up or they assign one of those guys to Providence, both of whom would require waivers. Now, who's more likely to get selected off the waiver wire? A young, talented, up-and-coming guy like Brandon Bussi, or a guy who's coming off a pretty down season with 4 years remaining on his contract at $3 million, but still. It's more likely that Bussi would get claimed. So perhaps the Bruins assign Korpisalo to Providence to begin the season to make sure that he has his game back before throwing him into the net at the NHL level. It would be a humbling experience for Korpisalo, to be sure, but it's better than, not playing at all. And, there's certainly a risk just throwing him in there for the Bruins based on his record from this past season. So that's something to consider as well. Korpisalo is not guaranteed an NHL job once Swayman signs. And this is from Fluto Shinzawa from The Athletic this morning. He said, quote, "In fact, it may be more suitable for Korpisalo to begin this season in Providence if the Bruins believe his game needs further repair. It's unlikely that any team would claim Korpisalo on waivers and assume his $3 million annual payday through 2028. End quote. That's kind of hilarious considering the Bruins believed it was worth taking that on in order to trade Ullmark, who's only making $2 million more this season, and to get that first-round pick. Korpisalo was a buyout candidate in Ottawa to begin with. The fact that the Bruins took on that contract, still a bit curious, but again, they believe that Goalie Bob can get the best out of him. Sending Korpisalo down would allow Bussi to be Swayman's number 2 and allow the Bruins to free up some cap space because Bussi signed for the league minimum, which is $775,000. He would be far more likely a waiver claim. He's 26, a .913 save percentage, and 41 AHL appearances last year. Very likely that he would be claimed by another team. Korpisalo, not so much. So it would not only save the Bruins some cap space, but it would also perhaps allow them to extend an offer to Tyler Johnson, who's in on a PTO, or maybe add some other guys who are on PTOs elsewhere who don't get unsigned, or circle back on the likes of James Van Riemsdyk, maybe probably not Kevin Shattenkirk. They're pretty set on defense. You always need some depth, though. Or maybe Blake Wheeler, Kyler Yamamoto, saving that $2.5 $2.25 million would allow them to add a couple forwards on $1 million contracts. So that's a real distinct possibility that Korpisalo could start the season in the AHL. So a lot of uncertainty in net here. Can Korpisalo find his game? Will he have to do it in the AHL? Will Jeremy Swayman be signed before training camp? Or at least before the start of the regular season? All these things are up in the air, and you're going to want to subscribe to Locked On Boston Bruins in order to keep up on all the latest with respect to the black and gold. Do check out Locked On NHL Next, all the latest from around the hockey world from a national perspective and with local insights from our hosts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, as is this podcast, and we bring you all the latest on your favorite team every single day. Take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. Have a great weekend. I've got a softball tournament tomorrow, our end of the season tournament. We're the 4 seed, top 8, battling for the championship. It's gonna be huge. And basketball practice starts for one of our kids. A birthday party in the family. It's gonna be a busy one. And we'll be back on Monday to discuss the Boston Bruins. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. If anything breaks, I'll be sure to post a short over there. All right, friends, that's it. Peace.